Welcome to Law Firm Marketing Mastery. I'm Christopher Small. Law Firm Marketing Mastery brings together the best coaches in the industry to teach you how to crush it with your law firm. Imagine having a bunch of experienced mentors teaching you their expertise, packing decades of research, testing, and tough lessons into a concise curriculum. I've created one of the premier law firm coaching programs available anywhere, and it's free. This is a show that I wish I had a decade ago. Now, this show is about you, and I'm here to help you start and build your best law firm. So make sure to stay up to date with everything going on here, as well as getting some killer free stuff by signing up for the newsletter at lawfirmmarketingmastery.com. If you're new to the show but want to know more about what I teach here at Law Firm Marketing Mastery, check out the Getting Started page at lawfirmmarketingmastery.com/start-here. That's where I've got the fundamentals of starting and building a successful law firm, such as choosing a niche, naming your firm, search engine optimization, internet marketing, leadership, mindset, and more. That stuff is all obviously extremely important to your success, so make sure you get a handle on that as well. I've also got Law Firm Confidential, a members-only site dedicated to starting and building a successful law firm, and the Inner Circle, an exclusive mastermind group for lawyers wanting to take their firm to the next level. Details on that at lawfirmmarketingmastery.com, or just give me a call or even email me at chris@lawfirmmarketingmastery.com, and I'll tell you exactly what you need to know to get started with that. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you here at Law Firm Marketing Mastery.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Law Firm Marketing Mastery podcast. I'm excited and honored to introduce today's guest, a professional speaker, sales trainer, and author of, at this time, 10 books on the power of business relationships, networking, presentation skills, and entrepreneurship. He spent over 20 years in sales, marketing, and business development roles with major corporations and AM Law 100 law firms. I don't even know how to say that, which is terrible. He regularly consults with corporations, law firms, and individuals on how to cultivate their personal brands and establish professional connections that will lead to more referral business. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Thom Singer. Welcome, Thom.
Thanks. Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure. I appreciate you coming on, and you know, I admittedly don't know a lot about you. I've looked at your books, looked at your website, but I'm really excited to hear what you've learned over the course of your career, because it looks like you've got a lot of information that I'm interested in, and my listeners will be interested in too. So I gave you the kind of the general biography about you, but where did you come from? How did you get into this world? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, congratulations to you for doing a podcast on marketing for lawyers, because I think it is such an important topic that, so many lawyers go to law school and, they think, oh, if I do great work, the business is going to find me.
Right.
And then at some point they turn around and say, oh my gosh, there's more to this than just being a great lawyer. And so I think the stuff that you're teaching on this podcast is great. And I have a real connection. I spent 4 years working for two big law firms. And so my career, I was a sales guy, and I actually sold to law firms. I called on large corporate and securities departments in big law firms. I worked for a financial printer during sort of the IPO boom back in the 90s and early part of 2000. And what happened was when the dot-com bubble burst, all of a sudden there wasn't going to be a lot of IPOs anymore. Everything kind of ground to a halt. And the company I worked for wanted to move me, and my wife and I wanted to stay in Austin, Texas. Okay. And my largest client was a California-based law firm, big firm, and I had been doing all their financial printing for all the IPOs that they worked on and all the other public company work that they did. And they came to me and said, how about if you stay in Austin and become the marketing person for our Austin and Dallas office? And it worked out fantastic. I worked for them for a couple of years, and then I went with the corporate and securities group to a Texas-based law firm and spent another 2 years, and just absolutely loved what I did. But one of the things that happened when I was there is the managing partner asked me to create a class for the lawyers on how to network, how to do marketing, how to get involved in the community and essentially develop more business. Right. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to hate this. They're going to fire me. And it was mandatory for all the lawyers in the Austin and Dallas offices, and I thought they're going to hate this.
Why did you think they were going to hate it?
Well, because I was their new marketing guy. The corporate people knew me, but the rest of them didn't. Right. And I thought, sitting through 90 minutes of me telling them how to get in the community, I just thought they were going to be bored. Right. I thought it wasn't going to be of interest to them. But they ended up liking it so much that they sent me on the road to all 10 offices of the firm to conduct this training. And I was in the Washington, D.C. office, and one of the partners said to me, why do you work for us? You should go and be a professional trainer and a professional speaker because you're really good at it. And I didn't even know you could make a living doing that. I was just doing it as part of my job.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of planted that seed. And although my career took me later on to a bank and later on to a consulting firm, I always sort of kept that thing in the back of my mind that maybe I could go and be a trainer and a consultant and work for myself.
Right, that's great. And here you are now, right? So currently, I mean, I gave you the. By the way, I need to settle this dispute that's running around in my head right now. We're not going to be able to move forward. Is it AM Law 100 or is it AM Law 100?
They call it the AM Law 100.
Okay,
it's the 100 largest law firms in America.
All right. Can you tell I'm living in that world? I don't even know what AM Law, how to say it. But that's cool. All right. But I digress, right? So I apologize for that. But
that's all right.
Okay. So then you did eventually branch off, and that's kind of where you're at now, right? You're a speaker. You have several books, and and then looking at the books, they all sort of revolve around a general theme. Is that fair to say? Is it networking in general? And then you sort of drill down to specific niches. I know they're not all like that, but from what I remember, there were a couple that were kind of like that. Is that right?
Sure, absolutely. And so I was working for a consulting firm, and on April 1st, 2009. Which, if you think about it, April of 2009 was arguably the lowest part of the recession, like the worst time ever since the Great Depression. And I got laid off. And that's when I decided I'd always kind of wanted to do this. I'd already written a couple books. I was doing it on the side when I could. And I called my wife and I said, I am now a professional speaker and trainer full time.
Nice.
And I think she cried for like 2 days or something, thinking that we were going to lose everything.
Right.
And but she was really supportive. She was really supportive. And I went out on my own. And I'm always real honest with people. We hemorrhaged cash for 2 years. It was hard going from corporate, salary to totally being a solopreneur.
Right.
But eventually we got it going. And so I'm coming up on 6 years. That's what I've been doing. And my books all revolve around, your network, your brand, getting yourself out in the community, and that includes public speaking skills and things like that.
Okay, cool. And we're definitely going to dive into a lot of that because it's something that I think about all the time and I'm really interested in. And it's also very relevant because it truly is, like you said, they don't teach you anything about business. And when you're in law school, they don't even teach you anything about networking when you're in law school. And they don't. And it's kind of sad, really, because even if you're not a law firm owner, even if you're just a lawyer in a big law firm, for example, I mean, I've never worked there, but I feel like the guys that get taken care of, and the girls, the ladies too, are the ones that bring in the business. Those are the highly leveraged spots in a firm. Those people are getting cut last, I feel like. And the skills that you teach and the skills that are important, I think, could be used by almost anyone in definitely in the legal profession,
Well, Chris, you bring up a great point, and that is, number one, they don't teach this in law school. And so everybody goes out, and in fact, I don't remember the exact percentage, but a large number of lawyers at some point in their career will hang their own shingle. So the fact that they're never being taught the business skills and the business development skills that are important is actually, ridiculous.
Right.
But they're not taught that. And then the other thing is it doesn't matter if you're a partner in a large firm or if you're Sally who just hung out her own shingle and is doing solo work as a lawyer. At the end of the day, you are a solopreneur if you're a lawyer, because if you're a partner in a big firm, your own practice is its own business because you are judged fully on the business that you're working on and the business that you're bringing in. And so if you don't have business, you're the first one laid off. If you have business, like you said, you get to stay around longer. So really, every lawyer is an entrepreneur, whether he likes it or not, or she likes it or not.
Yeah, definitely. It's such an important concept, and I just don't think people get it a lot of times, even when they've been in a firm for a long time. I've talked to people that wonder why they're getting passed up for, why Joe over here or Sally made partner and they didn't. It's like, well, they brought in their salary at least in business this year, and that's why. That's basically why. It doesn't matter if you're that great. Attorneys don't necessarily get promoted up the ladder. You do what you're good at, which is law work, legal work.
In fact, what I think a lot of people thought, hey, if I just make it into a big firm, I'm set for life. And if we've learned anything over the last decade, that's not true. The practice of law is a business.
Right.
And business has certain rules that it has to follow, and one of them is profit and loss. And that's why salespeople in large corporations, like if you look at Cisco or Nike or any big company, the people who are doing the high-end sales and high-end marketing, they make more money than partners in law firms. And people say, well, that can't be true. Partners in law firms make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, and so do great salespeople.
Right. Definitely. So I want to talk a little bit more about your background, and in particular, I'm interested to know how you learned all the skills that you learned. I'm sure that you had some training with each of your positions, but did you do anything outside? Or for me, I'm always reading books and doing all kinds of stuff, but I'm just curious about your sort of progression from marketing and sales kind of newbie to where you are now.
Yeah. So for me, I worked for a couple large corporations early on that had great sales training, and so that really helped.
Right.
But then after that, a lot of it was really up to me to sort of do on my own. And what it really was reading a lot. I mean, I would read 25 business books every single year. I would dive into sales and marketing topics. And I just made it a priority. And what I try to teach people from my own lessons in life is, if you make marketing and sales a second-tier priority, and I don't care if you're a lawyer or if you own a pet shop or if you own a dry cleaner or if you're Coca-Cola, if you make sales and marketing a second-tier priority, you're going to have second-tier results. So I always made learning about sales and marketing a high priority, and so I learned by doing.
Right. Fantastic. I figured it. I figured that was the case, but just wanted to know. And so, you coming on here is perfect timing for you and for me, because I was looking for people like you to talk to, and you have a new book coming out, right? Relatively soon, or maybe coming out, called the ABCs of Law Firm Marketing. Is that what it's called? ABCs of Legal Marketing.
Yes. It's the ABCs of Legal Marketing, and it's the fourth book in my little ABCs series. I wrote a book several years ago called the ABCs of Networking that I've used for years when I go in and train in law firms, when I work with practice groups, or when I go in and speak at partner meetings. I usually will pass out this book, and it's really just the basic things about getting involved in the community. It's a little tips book. So A is for attitude, B is for brand, C is creativity, and then there's 500 to 800 word essays on each topic. So they're really easy to read. And over the years, everybody said, how come you've never done this for lawyers? And since I had this legal marketing background, I don't know why I did that. But I used to just use the networking book for lawyers, just use it when I would teach in law firms. And what they would do is take the book, and then every time they would have a meeting with their section, like once a week or once a month, depending on the way the firm operated, they would assign someone a letter. And they'd have to report back what they read and why that's important. So sometimes it would take a year, to work through the book, but it was really good at getting people to have discussion about the topics that were important. So in March of this year, I will finally get around to the one that's focused on lawyers, and it's my 11th book, and it is, again, it's a small tips book, but it's all about things that are important to attorneys when it comes to marketing their practice.
Okay, perfect. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that if you're open to it.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, fantastic. So I guess before we even get into the kind of the ABCs part of it, how do you define networking when it in the context of lawyers? Maybe it applies to everyone, but when someone wants to talk to you about networking and they're a lawyer, or you want to talk to someone, what do you have in mind for that? Because there's some people think networking is just going and handing out business cards. We know that's not the case, but what is it for you? How do you define that?
So if we were to talk about networking, if I was to line up 50 business professionals and we were to say, what is networking? We get 50 different definitions of the word networking. There's just so many different ways that people look at it. So the definition that I like to use is it is the creation of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships between two or more people where everybody in the relationship succeeds more because of the relationship than they would without it. And so networking isn't about going to a networking event. The networking doesn't take place at the networking event. That's just a tool to meet people. The actual networking takes place in what do you do afterwards? How do you own the follow-up? And over time, sometimes over many years, you develop that trust of that relationship. And that's what networking is about. If you think it's a quick fix because you don't have any business, you're going to be bummed.
Right. I guess, for me, some of my networking relationships have resulted in quick business, but that is never really the main motivation. I don't ever go anywhere with the idea that someone's going to send me business today. And I don't approach a relationship like that either.
And it does happen. I mean, there's always the outlier where you meet somebody and they need an attorney right away, and that's great when it happens. But the real meat of building a career, if you go in, and I always tell lawyers to take a look at who do you admire in your community. I mean, let's look at the type of law that you practice in the region of the country that you live in. Who do you look at who might be 5 or 10 years, 20 years older than you? And you look at that man or that woman and you say, wow, that's who I want to be 10 years, 20 years down the line. If you reverse, engineer, if you dissect their practice, most often, and there's exceptions, but most often you're going to find somebody who has built amazing relationships and has left a trail of a fantastic reputation behind them. Yeah, there are some assholes out there who succeed, and that's just life.
Right.
But if you really look at it, most people have done that. And so if you want to build a successful career, you have to realize how you treat people all along the way is going to be where your business comes from a decade from now.
Let's take a quick time out for a sec. I'm sure there are a ton of you out there thinking, yeah, this all sounds great, but how do I actually do this stuff? How do I implement it? Let me introduce you to a program I've created called Law Firm Confidential. Law Firm Confidential is about one thing: results. I've unlocked the secrets of my success in step-by-step how-to fashion so you can see the results with your firm that you know you deserve. And if you're just starting out, what I've created is the best how to start a law firm program around. Don't sit around and let your life pass you by. Go to lawfirmmarketingmastery.com/confidential today to find out how you can create the law firm of your dreams. Now, back to the good stuff.
Right. Now, are you of the practice of sort of doing things that you're interested in and taking leadership positions and networking through that way, or are you more in favor of kind of strategic relationship building? How do you feel about those kind of areas? Does that make sense?
So I think and I think there's not a right or wrong answer. I think the answer to what you asked is both. I mean, I think you have to, you have to participate in things that you enjoy because you're more apt to do it the long run. I know somebody who got involved with the board of their local symphony because there were a lot of great business contacts on the board of the symphony. The problem was this person hated the symphony.
Right.
And over time, he stopped showing up and got kicked off the board. And I'm like, well, of course, because you hated the symphony. You wouldn't go to the performances. You really didn't know anything about music. That's not the place to be because it's, there's some good people on that board. That's ridiculous. So, my answer is always, A, you have to go where you want to go, but then B, you have to be strategic about it because you have to go where the business is. I mean, depending on what type of law you practice, there are different types of buyers who hire you. So you have to put yourself in and around the people who can do it because, if you're a corporate and securities lawyer who works with large companies, hanging out with a bunch of people who own pet shops may or may not be the right place for you to be.
Right. Definitely. Okay. All right. So let's talk about this first A. I'm interested. So attitude is the A of the ABCs, right?
Well, so that was in the ABCs of networking. The A was for attitude. In the ABCs of legal marketing, the A is for analytics.
Oh,
and
okay.
That really means so each book is always different as to where the alphabet goes.
Okay, fair enough.
And in the case of analytics, you've got to be tracking all kinds of things about your business. You've got to be tracking, everything. You got to be tracking where you're spending money to advertise, and is your phone ringing because of that? Right. You have to be tracking where you're investing your time. Are the people that you're hanging out with really leading into the types of relationships that can benefit you? So you have to be, really into tracking everything, or you're going to come up on the short end. Too often people think, if I just show up or if I just buy this ad, it's all going to work out. And they have no idea if they're ever getting business from that. So all inbound traffic to your firm you need to be tracking where that comes from. So as a professional speaker, I'm in the service business. Well, and as a lawyer, you're in the service business. So, a lot of people say, well, that's a different industry. At the end of the day, I get 90% of my leads to speak at conferences from word of mouth.
Yeah.
And it's usually people who sat in an audience and saw me, or once removed, or sometimes they'll hear me like on your podcast or something, someone's planning an event, they'll be like, oh, let's call that guy.
Right.
But it's usually word of mouth, someone saw me or they're once removed from that. It's very rare that somebody is actually, finding me through a Google search, or I do a lot of social media, I do some actual advertising, marketing. It's rare that I find clients that way. Doesn't mean that stuff's not important, but that's, not how I find clients. I can tell you I spoke 64 times in 2014, and with a click of a button, I can tell you where every single referral came from, and usually I can trace back 2 or 3 speeches to where the refer met me.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's
A is for analytics.
Yeah.
You got to be studying. Marketing in a law firm is no longer a reactionary function.
Right.
Whether you're a small firm or a large firm, you absolutely have to be proactive in studying where your business is coming from.
Yeah, it's a big emphasis for me, particularly. I mean, when you start a firm, you sort of have to just continue to build on things, and that's one of the things that is really an emphasis for us right now. And for me, what I did was this is when it comes to leads in particular, I basically backed down and tried to figure out, okay, to reach our income goals, we need to have at least this many leads, and then we need to do these things, whatever ideas we come up with to get the leads. But tracking the leads and where they come from and how many there are is critical, because that sort of back ends everything else. That's one way to know if our projections are right or wrong. And then we can know if we increase our leads, right at the end of the day, we should be able to make X more dollars, kind of a thing. But I couldn't agree more. And,
right.
And I have a question with you about this analytics, though, too, particularly when it comes to kind of networking and keeping in touch with people. Do you have a system for keeping track of kind of both the people in your network, maybe the people that you want to create a relationship with? What do you have a system for that? And if you do, what is it?
Well, so there's all kinds of ways that you can, sort of track your relationship management. There's all kinds of relationship management software out there that you can use. And I've never decided that one is better than the other. There's all kinds of ways you can do it. It's sort of whatever works for you. I know there's some that are specific for law firms, but the idea is you need to be tracking. Now, I'll be honest, I'm sort of a little unscientific with it. So a lot of times I just use LinkedIn. Okay. And I have a rule when it comes to LinkedIn. I don't link to people I've never met. I don't believe in the fact that you link to everybody with a pulse and someday they wake up in the middle of the night and send you business. Right. I find that only people who send me business are people I've developed relationships with. So I only link to people who I've had a cup of coffee, a meal, or a beer with. Or the digital equivalent, because talking to you for an hour on this podcast, it's a lot like we sat down and had a cup of coffee or a beer.
For sure.
So I need to have some sort of a dialogue with somebody in order for me to link to them in LinkedIn. So what I do, my business is really slow in July and it's really slow in December. Mm-hmm. And so every July and every December, I take a letter a day. Yep. And if it's A, I look at everyone whose last name starts with A, and I just decide, has it been too long since I've had contact with them? So twice a year, I'm looking at my whole list, and if it turns out I run across Chris Small and I think, wow, it's been a year, I probably should send Chris an email or call him. I'll do it right there on the spot. Right. And so one day I go through the A's, another day I go through the B's, another day I go through the C's. And by the end of the month, I have made a conscious decision whether to reach out to someone or not. And that means at least twice a year I'm reaching out to the people that I need to. That doesn't mean I reach out to everybody, because some people I just don't have the love connection with. I had a cup of coffee with them and we linked, but there's not any there. Right. But sometimes I run across a name that's really important, and I reach out to them and touch them, and all of a sudden they refer me business. So you can do it really scientifically or not scientifically. The answer is you got to be doing something.
Right. Definitely. Okay, that's great. That's a great tactic. That's kind of I've heard about that in the real estate. I can't remember who it is, but somebody in the kind of the real estate marketing arena, they do the ABCs, but they do one a week. so they still touch everybody twice a year, but they kind of reach out to everybody in the A's, like week 1, then through 26.
Yep.
So that's a great way to do it.
The other thing is, I don't tell them, by the way, I'm doing all the A's today. I just say, hey, Bill Applebaum, good. I was thinking of you today. How you doing?
Right. Totally. And people, and I guess, would you say that people are generally excited or at least interested to hear from you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who find me obnoxious, but for the most part, I always tell people when I say reach out to somebody, sometimes they'll say, well, I haven't talked to them in a year. That would be awkward. And I say, well, what if they called you?
Yes.
And they go, well, if they called me, it would be great. And I was like, oh, maybe it would be great to them too. So, I find if you're not calling asking for something every time you call, if you're just calling to, bring them value or have a nice conversation and you're not doing it too much, most people are glad to hear from you. And, if they're not, that's their problem.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And that's sort of the exact same perspective I try to get from people is, what if you were on the other end of the line? Or what if, even when it comes to emailing and newsletters and things like that, I'd say, think about if you were getting this from someone. Are you angry that you got an email a week that is, informational or interesting, or a newsletter once a month or something like that? And they say no. And I say, well, yeah, they're not going to be either, And if they are, they're not really the right person for you or your network anyway. Maybe they're just not a good fit.
And if you call them a few times and they never call you back, realize that they're not interested and move on. It's kind of like dating. After you make a couple of attempts, if she doesn't call you back, wish her well and go find somebody else.
Right. Right. Definitely.
So if you want to pick a couple of more letters in the alphabet, we can do that. If you want to talk more about the book, or we can go on to something else.
Yeah, no,
I can't do the whole book. It would take us 5 hours.
I know. I want to know what. I guess I want to know more. I want to know what I at least want to know what A, B, and C are. What the if you'll tell us what they are.
Sure.
What they stand
so
for.
A was analytics,
yep.
And B is for brand. At the end of the day, attorneys always will live and die based on what their reputation and their brand is in their community. And lots of times people haven't thought about this. They say, Tom, wait a minute, I'm an individual attorney. Coca-Cola is a brand. Southwest Airlines is a brand. Nike is a brand. And what I tell them is, you're a brand. And if you've never thought about it, it doesn't mean you don't have a brand in your community. It means that you don't own your brand. You've just let it happen. And so it's really important that you think about the fact that your brand is really, sort of your calling card. Because doing good work, a lot of people say, well, my brand is I am a good lawyer. Well, being a good lawyer is just the ticket into the game. Who in the world says, oh, I need to go hire a crappy lawyer today?
Right.
Nobody does. They expect you to be good because you went to law school and because you're renewing your license and you're doing all your CLE credit. So the brand that you develop, it's really a promise of how you're going to behave. And it's not just about winning. It's not just about doing good work. It's about, everything you do. Are you nice to work with? Do you follow through? Do you return calls? So, Chris, do you know what the number one complaint is to almost every bar association in the country about lawyers?
Yeah, my guess is it has to do with communication, not returning phone calls.
Yeah,
or
non-responsive
emails or anything, right?
Absolutely. Non-responsiveness is the number one complaint. And I know a lot of people who someone will say, hey, do you know a good lawyer who does X, Y, and Z? And someone will say, oh, Ted is really good, but by the way, he won't call you back till about the 6th call. Well, how excited are you to call Ted?
Right.
You're not.
Right.
So if somebody else says, oh, Mary is fantastic, and, she's really on top of things, and she gets right back to you, and those are your 2 recommendations, are you really even going to shop it around?
Right.
So every little thing you do contributes to your brand. Now, large companies, Southwest Airlines, Nike, etc., those large companies have dozens, gosh, if not hundreds of people whose job title on their business card is brand manager.
Mm-hmm.
And those people's jobs are to protect and promote the image of that company all the time.
Right.
Now, as a lawyer, you can't hire a dozen people. And even if you have a marketing person in a larger law firm, usually the firm has tried to save money, so they hire someone who's more junior. And so that person isn't necessarily out there building brand, although that's sort of what I've done with the firms I've worked for, is I was sort of a front man for the firm as far as being sort of part of the community. But in most cases, they hide the marketing people away in the back.
Right.
And So even if the firm has a marketing person, they're probably not out there building your brand.
Right.
So as the individual attorney, whether you're an associate of counsel or a partner, it's your own brand. It's not just the firm. And a lot of lawyers think, well, I work for, this big firm and we have a good brand. People hire the lawyer long before they hire the firm. So big companies have people who do it. As a solo or a small or even a big company lawyer, you have to own your brand, which means you have to be the brand manager, which means 24/7, in addition to doing your work, you have to be promoting and protecting your brand in your community.
Definitely. And I want to sort of follow up, too, with a little bit more about the example, just with someone saying, hey, call Tom, for example, but it's going to take 6 calls for him to call you back. What really happens is they stop referring that person,
Yep.
Because any kind of referrals is not just a reflection on the person being referred, but it's also the referrer, so they're basically vouching for you when they refer business to you. And if you don't back up what they're saying, it's not just a reflection on you, it's a reflection on them. And that's sort of what I hate the most about not ever having a bad experience with anyone is that aspect of the relationship, because referral partners are so important and valuable to your business that to give one up because you're not returning phone calls is terrible. It's not good business at all.
And a lot of lawyers think it's okay because they think that sends a message that says, "Oh, I am busy, so I must be good."
Right.
And I'll tell you, that's crock. That's BS. That is not the reality of how people look at you. If you are doing rude things, and not calling someone back is rude. I know we live in a day where avoiding voicemail seems like it's okay. But if someone calls you and asks you to call them back and you don't call them back, especially if they're, paying you, if you're not calling them back, you're being rude, and nobody says, "Wow, let's celebrate rude."
Right.
All right, everyone. Now I want to take another time out for a sec. A lot of people think the Law Firm Marketing Mastery training programs are just about making money, and honestly, yeah, there's a lot of that. Spend some time with me and you're definitely going to be making more money. But there's so much more to it than just making money. It's important to be rich and have a great life too. I want you to be great at work, great at home, great with your friends and family. I want you to step it up everywhere. I want you to get results with your life, not just with your business. And the results are real. I've had many conversations with members who are experiencing big time success. If you're listening to Law Firm Marketing Mastery, you are the type of person who's already interested in improving themselves. There's a lot of options out there today, and I think you have already decided. If you want to check out your options for improving your business and living the life of your dreams, check out lawfirmmarketingmastery.com/confidential. Hope to hear from you soon. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to, I have a friend that works at a different law firm, and they do work that's sort of tangentially related to ours, but we don't do it. And I was sending them these referrals that come in, and she said, yeah, the main attorney doesn't even call a lot of them back if he doesn't think they're eligible for what they need, he doesn't even call them back. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, no, we don't do that. So I just told her, I was like, okay, that's fine. I can't send you guys these referrals anymore. I'm going to send them to somebody else because it takes 30 seconds.
Well, because that hurts your brand.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, it definitely does. Because when we refer people out, we say these people are good. You can trust them like you can trust us. And it's important that is backed up with the people that we refer out, So it matters. It matters.
So it does. So B is for brand.
Yes.
And then C, we sort of touched on because you asked the question in the analytics one. C is for your contact list.
Okay.
And I'm really big at telling people that adding someone to LinkedIn because you met them for 5 minutes does not make them part of your network. So meeting someone once does not mean that they're part of your network. And this is a big mistake people make: is they go to a Chamber of Commerce dinner and someone introduces them to the mayor or to a potential client or to anybody, and they get their card, they run back, they send a LinkedIn request, and they think, yay, they're part of my network. And what you have to remember is meeting someone once makes them not a contact, not part of your network, but meeting someone once makes them someone you have met once.
Right.
And there is a huge difference between someone you have met once and someone who you've established an ongoing, long-term, mutually beneficial relationship. And so this contact list isn't just like a graveyard of email addresses. It has to be something you're keeping alive. So I already talked about how I try to go through twice a year and make sure at least the people I want to be cultivating a relationship, I'm at least reaching out twice a year, if not more.
Right. Right. Yeah, the contact list is huge for us too, and that's what I tell people here. You should be building your list anyway. Whether it's basically everybody that calls us gets put on our email list, and we keep up with them.
And that's great, but each individual attorney should have a list of 25 to 50 people who they want to cultivate relationships with, because we'll meet hundreds of thousands of people over a career, and you cannot constantly be cultivating thousands of relationships. And so you need to have a list that's on your desk of the people you want to get closer to, that you want to know better, because maybe they could hire you, maybe they could refer business, heck, maybe you just like them, and you want to become better friends. You have to have their names on sort of an A list, because if they're out of sight, they're out of mind.
Yeah, definitely, and it's important to promote this, I think, to your associates or whoever else is in your firm, because pretty much across the board, everyone's going to have a different network, so you're going to expand your reach exponentially by opening up all those channels.
And another mistake is a lot of firms try to limit the associates from going out and building contacts because they're afraid they could get a better offer and leave or go start their own firm.
Right.
But the worst thing you can do is to hold back associates, because if you have an associate who's really good at building business, they'll bring in more money to your firm. Now, if you can't keep that lawyer happy and challenged and satisfied with his career, yes, they will leave. However, I don't know why people want to have a whole stable of mediocre people. Oh, I don't want them to get good. I don't want them to bring in a lot of business because they'll leave. I'd rather they stay unconnected and kind of stupid. Then you end up with a whole stable of people who are B players.
Right.
Cultivate everybody to be as close to an A player as they can be, and then work to keep them happy and challenged and satisfied. And if they move on, wish them well and replace them with someone else.
Yeah, and I've actually found there's no better way to sort of build loyalty to you and your firm than by actually teaching people the skills that will help them succeed.
You are so right.
I mean, not everybody's going to stay, but those people those people you may not necessarily want at your firm anyway.
That's right. Hey, let me give you one more. We only said A, B, and C, but let me give you D, because
okay.
I think D is one that's so overlooked by everybody. Small firms, large firms, independents, and that is D is for be a destination firm. Now, destination firm is a firm where people want to move their legal practice to. Doesn't mean you're going to merge with everybody. It doesn't mean you're going to let every lawyer come be part of your practice. But you want them to want you. And so when you're out in the community, if you work for a firm and you're having a bad day and you go out for drinks with your law school buddies, and they're like, hey, how are things at, XYZ law firm? Do not ever, whether you're a partner or an associate, tell your dirty laundry to other lawyers in your community, because all they'll hear is all the dysfunction. And at a lot of law firms, it's just part of the game. There's going to be squabbles. There's going to be problems. There's going to be a partner you don't like. And if you go through and just squabble, why you hate this partner, why they're awful to work for, why you hate, your staff, whatever it is, later on when that person wants to leave the firm they're at and go somewhere else, they're not going to go to where the dysfunction is. You want to create an image with other lawyers that you work at a growing and dynamic firm, so that if they want to make a move and bring their book of business, they're going to come to you and say, what do you think? You can say yes or no. But if they don't come to you, you can't say yes. If they're not coming saying, hey, I want to move my $2 million book of business, which is ancillary and additive to the practice that you have, you're leaving that business for another competitor. So you want other lawyers in town. You're marketing as much to the other lawyers to move to you as you are marketing to clients to use you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great. That's what everybody wants to be anyway. I hope. But
right. Well, but I don't think they think about it. I don't think lawyers think about being a destination for other great lawyers, because, if they did, first of all, they wouldn't tell tales out of school. And lots of times I find a lot of people gossip a lot about the problems in their own firm. And, nobody wants to go to a firm where there's problems.
Right.
So you have to be marketing why your firm is a fabulous place to work, and I call it being a destination firm. And what happens is, A, you get all the choices of all the best lawyers in town when they are ready to make a move. And B, you also know what's going on everywhere else because people are always coming to you to have the conversation. So you know kind of all the inside scoop about the whole legal climate in your area.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's great. So do you go all the way through from A to Z in the book?
We go all the way through to Z.
Oh, okay. All right. I missed that part. I don't know why. Maybe it's the vacation I'm on.
Each chapter is about 600 or 800 words on that particular, letter of the thing. We go all the way through the alphabet, and Z. I'll tell you, Z says Z is the end, and then it goes through a whole thing, and basically it tells you that there is no end to your marketing. Right. You got to start over again every day.
Okay, fantastic. So I kind of want to circle back. There was a question I wanted to ask you about the analytics. And, what a lot of people listening to this podcast are typically smaller law firm owners, new law firm owners. And, when we talk about all this stuff, it can sort of get too high of a level. So when it comes to analytics, if there were maybe just one or two that you would focus on first before you sort of added anything else that you were tracking, what are some of the things that you would be focusing on when it comes to this stuff from an analytics standpoint to start? What are the one or two key indicators that you want to be looking at?
So you want to be tracking how much money you're spending on your marketing. So a lot of law firms join all kinds of organizations, and they pay dues everywhere, and then they never show up. Right. Or what I find happens when I go in to do what I call a networking audit is all kinds of people sign up to go to these lunches because every city has these great business organizations and these great legal organizations. And people sign up, and lunch sometimes nowadays is $45. If it's a dinner, it can be $80, $100, $150. And then they get busy, and they say, oh, well, I'm busy, so I'm just going to skip dinner. Well, the firm has just paid $150 for dinner, and now your partner or your associate is busy, so they're going to work late, or they're going to go home, see their kids, or whatever, and that $150 is flushed down the toilet. So you need to be tracking every dollar you're spending on any type of marketing and networking that you're doing. And that's the first analytic. Is if you're not watching the output of money, and then are people really going and tracking what associations you're actually participating in before that dues renewal comes up, it's a big flushing sound of money. So that's the first thing I would say you have to track is where am I spending money and am I really participating in those groups?
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. And then would you then, when it comes to that kind of stuff, are you trying to track? I know you're tracking your referrals and things like that. And you are, if you can, obviously trying to track that back to that specific activity. Right.
Well, you can, and at the end of the day, that's ideal. It's two different things. One is tracking back where the leads are coming to the activity. That's fantastic. That's even a higher level. The first thing is just don't be throwing money out of a moving car.
Right.
So I'm just saying track what you're doing and make conscious decisions of why am I spending this money? Does this, lead me closer to my goal, or am I just doing it? Lots of times, the biggest mistakes that like mid-sized law firms make is that they'll buy tables at every charity event in town. Mm-hmm. There's the banquet for this and the gala for that, and they buy tables and they buy tables. And when I ask them, why are you buying all these tables? They say, well, all of my competitors are, and we'll be noticed if we don't. And then I ask, who bought tables last year at that gala? Well, I don't know. Well, nobody knows. Nobody's paying attention out there if you buy a table or not. Now, if you have a client who's on the board of the charity, yep, you should buy it. You should be buying a table. Yeah. But if you don't have a direct tie to that charity, don't think people are sitting around thinking about you, because they're not. And the biggest mistake they make then is they buy a table and then nobody goes. So there's a table up near the front with a big flag on it that says the name of your law firm, and nobody's there. Right. That is not marketing. That says we threw money at this and then couldn't get anybody to show up.
Right. There's also the feeling too that if we're spending money, it must be paying money. Okay, so I have to cut in here. You'll notice that there's a little more background noise. I'm at Starbucks. I'm actually editing this interview, and I noticed that at this point my audio stops. So the other audio is there. We're going to pick it back up, and I'm just going to ask the questions that I asked beforehand, and we'll just fill it in. Okay, so just act like nothing's happened, and here we go. So what would you say was your biggest secret to success? You know, what was the thing that set you apart and got you over the hump?
Sure. Well, in my case, a lot of the issue was really just keeping going because, you know, it was hard when we were hemorrhaging money. I mean, we had a mortgage to pay, we had kids, we had all the stuff that you have. You know, my wife works part-time, so I had to come up with health care and everything else that went on top of it. And, you know, I had made a pretty good salary, and all of a sudden we were making less than half of that. And so, you know, there was money piling up on credit cards, and we weren't taking vacations. And somebody I knew said to me, "At what point do you quit?" And I said, I didn't really understand because I knew at that point I hadn't gone long enough. I gave myself a 2-year runway. And a year into it, people were saying, well, maybe you just have to quit. Maybe you're never going to make it. And I knew that 100% of the people who quit don't make it. And so what I did is I had a number when I had gone $100,000 into debt, I had to go get a job. And when 2 years had passed, if I wasn't making enough money, I had to go get a job. And at 2 years, I was not that far in debt, and I started to make money, and it sort of started to turn around. Now, the hard part was I spent the next 3 years paying off the debt that I did have. So it took me 5 years to really get to the point where I was back to square one. But I knew that if I quit, I couldn't make it, and I was really enthusiastic about this career. I really believed I make a difference when I work with teams or when I speak at conferences or when I speak at like a partner retreat or something like that. I knew I made a difference because the feedback that I was getting, you know, both short-term and long-term from people who I worked with. And so I just kept plodding through. Now, you know, sometimes you have to walk away and go get a job. And you know, had that happened, I would have done that. But for me, I was fortunate I was able to turn the corner before I had to do that. But it just meant working really hard and trying new ways. And I was very focused on sales because I had a sales background. When I didn't have money, I knew the only answer was I had to sell something. So I just had to work twice as hard at the sale.
So you would say then that taking action, you know, that's what really got you success, right? Taking action, actually doing something, getting yourself out there.
If you're not out there doing it, it's not going to happen. I mean, you know, clients don't like fall in through magic fairy dust through the ceiling. You have to go out and turn over the rocks to make it happen.
What is your morning routine?
Yeah, I have a high school kid and a middle school kid, and so the morning routine is getting up in time to get them out the door. One of them drives to school, one rides the bus, and it's getting them up and out the door. You know, it takes a whole family effort to get the day going, and then I take some time for me. I read, I have a cup of coffee. You know, I kind of get my mind in the right place, and then, you know, around 8 or 9 o'clock, I start work. And I work all day. I don't, you know, I work for myself. If I'm not with a client or if I'm not speaking, I'm still working, which means I'm writing, which means I'm doing marketing, which means I'm doing social media, which means I'm making phone calls. But I work all day long.
What is a habit that has gotten you success, or what do you think is a habit that has helped you get the success that you've had?
I try to refer people every day. Now, that doesn't mean I do that, but I look for a way to refer somebody, whether it's, hey, you need to listen to Chris Small's podcast because it's really good and it'll help you with your legal practice, or whether it's actually calling up one of my past clients. And one of the things I do is I know 2 things as a professional speaker, and that is people who hire me to come speak at their events. Next year, they're going to have an event. I got this from another speaker, a guy named Ross Bernstein, and he said there are 2 truths that are evident. One is they're going to have an event next year, and 2, they're not going to have me back as the keynote speaker 2 years in a row. Now, while there's exceptions to that second one, it's almost entirely true. So what I try to do is I try to refer my clients to speakers I know, because finding a good speaker is really hard, and I know the difference between who's good and who's not. I try to refer my friends to my clients. And so some days I'll just call old clients or I'll email them and say, next year when you're looking for somebody, look at this person or that person. So one of my routines is I refer a lot of people for a lot of things. And I wish I could say one for one. Everybody refers me back, but they don't. But I get a lot of business because I go out of my way to refer other people.
Do you keep track of every referral and demand quid pro quo then?
No, never. If you try to keep score, it's going to fail and you're going to hate it. You're going to be frustrated. You might have to give to 8 people before anyone gives to you, and the person who gives to you won't even be one of the 8 people you helped, and you'll be like, well, wait a minute. But that 9th person who sent you a referral, they saw you helping other people, and that's why they helped you. So you just got to go be a giver and don't keep score.
What is a book you could recommend to help people, get to that next level?
So, it's an oldie. It's over 30 years old, but I think it's really the book that was my personal life changer when it came to success, and that is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. And, some people say, well, that's 30 years old. There's new books. Yeah, but it's like Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a classic that if you read it, you will come out better if you read it and you put those habits into effect.
So tell us when your book comes out.
I'm shooting for March, yeah. The ABCs of Legal Marketing. Look for it in March.
How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, if they go to my website or my blog, they can join my mailing list, and I don't overdo it. It's about every 2 or 3 months I send out a newsletter. They can always follow me on Twitter. They can go to, I have a Facebook page for my speaking career, which is facebook.com/Thom Singer Speaker. They follow me on Twitter. It is THOMSINGER, and my Twitter account is @Thom Singer, THOM Singer. ThomSinger.com. And I'll tell your listeners a little secret. If they forget I spell Tom THOM and they go to Thom Singer TOMSINGER.com, they're going to get there anyway because I own both URLs.
So you have both URLs?
That's right. So if your name is easy to misspell, buy the URL of the way most people would spell your name.
It was a pleasure having you with me. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your thoughtful answers, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks, Chris. It was an honor to be on your show.
Special thanks to you guys for listening, show feedback, and guest suggestions. I rely on you all to keep my finger on the pulse. So if you know someone that is a good fit for the show, let me know. Chris@lawfirmmarketingmastery.com, and of course, Law Firm Confidential details there as well. Go ahead and email or call me honestly. That's the best way to get in touch, and I'll give you everything you need to know about my programs. If you are listening but aren't subscribed in iTunes or Stitcher, go ahead and make the change there, because getting your shows delivered free to your phone or computer while you sleep is the best way to make sure you don't miss anything. Just go to iTunes or Stitcher and search for Law Firm Marketing Mastery. That's it. And if you want to write me a nice review, I'll love you forever there as well, because it helps other people find me, and it's really important to keep my show ranks up. So tell your friends, because the greatest compliment you can give us is a referral to someone else, either in person or share it on the web. So have a great week. Go out there and take care of business, and know that the work you put in today is going to pay off 10 times over tomorrow.